Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Will Penfield, and on behalf of Everbridge, I'm excited to present this webinar, Designing the Perfect Business Continuity Training Exercise with Regina Phelps. During this event, our speakers will discuss the golden opportunity, the power of stories when creating exercises, how you go about creating exercises, and seeing your role in a new light. After the presentation, we will have a short Q&A session with our speakers. We also encourage you to follow us on Twitter @Everbridge and tweet along any insights during the program with the hashtag BCTraining. We also encourage everyone to participate and ask questions during the webinar. You can submit questions by typing in the questions widget and submitting the question to all panelists. Links to the slides and recording of the webinar will be sent out to all registrants by the end of the week. You can also look for a link to recordings for all of our webinars on everbridge.com under our resources section. And now I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. First up, we have Regina Phelps, who is an internationally recognized expert in the field of emergency management and continuity planning. Since 1982, she has provided consultation and educational speaking to clients in 4 continents. She is founder of Emergency Management and Safety Solutions, a consulting company specializing in incident management, exercise design, and continuity in pandemic planning. Clients include many Fortune 500 companies. Ms. Phelps is a frequent top-rated speaker at well-known conferences such as the Disaster Recovery Journal, CP&M, and the World Conference on Disaster Management. She is frequently sought out for her common-sense approach and clear, clean delivery of complex topics. Second up, we have Andrew Woods, who is the Managing Director at Resiliency Matters, Ltd. Andrew has worked in the business continuity field since 2004 and has built ISO and PCI-aligned resiliency programs from the ground up. Andrew is also a member of the Business Continuity Institute. And now, without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Regina. Regina, you may begin.
Great. Thank you, Will. It's a real pleasure to be with all of you today to talk about designing the perfect exercise. Now, for me, this is really about the power of an exercise. There's one challenge that all of us face, each and every one of us listening today, and that is, how do you get your coworkers, your team members, and your management to care about what you do, to really care about resiliency? It really doesn't matter whether you're in emergency management, business continuity, disaster recovery, crisis communications, or crisis incident management. You need and want them to care enough to put in the time and the attention to your plans, your processes, and your exercises. And you ultimately need management to fund these activities and programs. Now, what you need to do, of course, is that you need to find ways to inspire them, to herd them, if you will. And frankly, many of us will face an uphill battle in doing that. So what are you supposed to do? Well, this really leads me to what I'm here to talk about today. Today, what I want to talk about is actually human behavior. We're really all in the business of human behavior. Now, I know, you think this is all about continuity planning, but deep down inside, it's all about humans. In order to recover a business process, to manage an incident, to respond to an event, you need humans. And our challenge is to find creative, innovative ways to mold these individuals, these humans, into the responders that we need and want. Well, how do you do that successfully? Well, what if I could design for you an experience that would actually change human behavior? And what if this experience was engaging and empowering, a bit exciting, and actually fun? And throughout this activity, you could actually improve your plans, your team's performance, and ultimately the ability of your company to respond to an incident. You have to admit, that would be pretty sweet. And in fact, that's what a well-designed exercise will do. It's all about influencing human behavior, developing critical thinking, and guiding leadership competencies. And that's really what I want to talk about today. So when you look at my agenda, what you'll see is just as Will described. I want to talk about what I feel is the golden opportunity. I want to talk about the power of stories. And I want to talk about just some key ways that we go about designing exercises. And in my time with you, I'm only going to talk about 3. And then I want to talk about how you can see your role in a new light. So having said all of that, let's talk about this golden opportunity, if you will. Now, this golden opportunity are exercises. Exercises are the greatest opportunity you have in your career, in your practice, to do four things. One is to promote your program. The second is to educate your teams. The third is actually to validate your plans, and in some cases, you're building them on the fly. And then to lastly, and very importantly, engage your senior leadership. My belief, my personal belief after 34 years of practice, is the most important part of your job is actually holding exercises, conducting exercises that are well designed. And my experience with a lot of people is that they just don't have the time or the knowledge to actually design a really good exercise. And so my goal today is to try and give you some ideas about how you can do that. So what can you do with this great opportunity, this golden opportunity? You can influence behavior. I've seen it happen thousands of times. You can actually begin to develop critical thinking. And lastly, you can actually shape leadership skills. And if you were to look at something on our job description that's not there, it's all three of those things. So let's just peel those back just for a moment. The first thing is human behavior. And so if you stop and just think about, well, what does that even mean? Human behaviors is actually a huge range of actions and behaviors that we exhibit. And they're influenced by many, many things. Our culture, our attitudes, our values, our emotions, our ethics, even our genetics. There are many, many things that will actually impact and change human behavior. And when you look at influencing human behavior, that's one of our main goals, even though you may not look at it that way. But if you stop and think about what that means, you can see it ties directly to what you do. So first of all, let's peel these back. Clarifying roles and responsibilities. People often read their plans or their checklists, and they think they understand what you're asking them to do, or they understand their emergency or disaster job. But it's really only when you have to perform those tasks that you fully understand it. Because after all, stop and think about this. Plans, the plans that we write every single day of our lives, are written in a complete vacuum. The plan sounds good when you're writing it, sitting in your office, when you have all of your utilities working and life is great. But it's quite another thing to launch that plan after you've had a major earthquake or a big fire or an active shooter or a cyber attack, when everything is not available. And now you have to go into a different mode. It will improve individual performance. There is nothing like real practice to improve performance. Look at the Olympics. Any athlete knows that. Humans have to practice to achieve any level of proficiency. Thirdly, it's a great motivator. I'm often amazed that when you have to perform in front of your peers, how people all of a sudden get religion and get very serious about the work that we do. And we find that in many of our clients in the weeks leading up to an exercise, the exercise staff actually really engage with their plans, maybe for the first time. They read them, they revise them, they even schedule walkthroughs with their teams, and they make sure that the plan reviews are done and everybody's up to speed. That's great news, and we haven't even done the exercise yet. It instills confidence. One of the best ways to be confident is to be prepared. Learn everything that you need to know to be successful. If someone is prepared and has the knowledge to back it up, their self-confidence is going to soar. And we see that time and time again in an exercise where people walk in kind of flat-footed and they walk out on their toes because they did a great job. It gives you the opportunity to teach leadership and decision-making skills. Good decision-making, as we all know, is one of those essential life skills that everybody acquires through trial and error and practice. People's ability to lead during a stressful situation is going to vary greatly depending on their day-to-day abilities. And exercise provides the perfect environment for your team to practice these skills in realistic conditions. And then lastly, and really importantly, it's going to continue to build support for your program. There has not been an exercise I have done since 1982 where people didn't say, wow, that was great. I got a lot out of it. I really learned about what I'm supposed to do. And that inspires people It inspires them to light a fire under redoing their plans, training their teams. It inspires executives who engage in exercises to understand their role, the value of your program, and the importance of dedicating time and resources to the program that's going to make it work. That's huge. The second thing it does is helps us with critical thinking, which, as we know, is so important. Critical thinking is really the art of evaluating and analyzing towards improving something, towards a goal to improve. And if you look at having any kind of emergency or crisis, that's what we do. We're all about critical thinking. Now, when you think about critical thinking, what that does do also is we actually need to look at a few things. First of all, what does critical thinking do? It helps us, first of all, clarify our goals. That's what we want to do in any emergency. What are we trying to accomplish? What are our objectives? What do we want to achieve? Does it make sense now in this current situation? Is this achievable? That's what we need to do. We want to examine our assumptions. Do you have assumptions that are silently influencing your thinking or your process that maybe aren't helpful or in total conflict with the emergency that you're currently facing? Because it's different than you assumed it would be. Think of the pandemic flu in 2009. Everybody assumed it would be catastrophic. It wasn't. Our assumptions were completely different. It gives you the opportunity to discern hidden values. So these are those values that are actually understated, which means nobody's really talking about them, but they kind of drive behavior, and it gives you the opportunity to actually surface those things which can get in our way. It will also allow us to evaluate evidence. So we're weighing evidence, and that's basically, think of the information that's coming to you in a crisis. You have to weigh what's coming at you and decide whether it's valuable or not, pros and cons, back and forth, to make sure that it's really what we need to do. So we're constantly evaluating. It allows us to accomplish our actions. What is required to accomplish what we need to do? We're to be making those decisions in this process. And then lastly, we can assess our conclusions. We get a chance to step back after an exercise, see how we did objectively, and then what do we need to do to get better. So critical thinking is one of the things that we want out of an exercise, because what it does is allows us to recognize problems and find workable solutions. That's critically important. That's why we're doing this, right? It allows us to understand the importance of prioritization. Many times when we get design and exercise, we might give people a ton of injects. And some of them are just irritating and not important at all. But why do we do that? Because it makes people prioritize. If I only give you one problem in an exercise, you got all day. But if I give you 25, well, now you have to prioritize what's important. Then we have to gather and marshal our information. Huge issue in any exercise, in a real event. How do you gather situational awareness, and how do you manage it? That's a big finding hopefully you'll get in an exercise. It allows you to actually look at these assumptions and values, as I talked about earlier. A lot of times we have assumptions about how it's going to be, and often it's not that way at all. And this is a great opportunity to shake that out. It gives us an opportunity to interpret data. So when information is coming to us, is it valuable or not? Is it real or not? How do we fact check things? And then lastly, it allows us to really look at accurate judgments about specific things. Is this really the accurate response that we should be taking in this situation? We want our folks in any crisis to have great critical thinking skills. And the best way you can do that is by doing an exercise. The last big plus is really about leadership. Leadership skills and behaviors that can be developed in an exercise include a lot of different things, but I want to focus on 4. First of all, how you manage change in a stressful situation. Many of us know that many managers are great in day-to-day calm environments, life is good, but all of a sudden in the heat of battle, some people simply unravel. We need to know that in advance. We need to practice so they can develop that disaster skill, if you will. It allows us to solve problems and make real-time decisions. Many times in emergencies, as we all know, decisions are made with incomplete information because that's what we have to do. Sometimes in an exercise or in a real crisis, if we're advising somebody, they'll say, I need more information, And I have to look at them and say, look, this is it. This is all you have. You need to make a decision. Wow, that makes people uncomfortable. But that's a great skill to work on. You also get a chance to manage group politics. Maybe that never happens in your company, but it does in some. And managing politics can be difficult. Because group dynamics, as we know, can be difficult even on the best of days. And sometimes in a crisis, they become unwieldy. A leader needs to practice how to manage conflicting ideas and concepts and teams at the time of crisis. And they can do that in an exercise because they can learn from the experience and then they can apply it as they go forward. And lastly, it really allows us to create useful communications of all kinds to all parties. It's rare that at the end of an exercise I hear, wow, we did a great job of communicating. What do I usually hear? We did a lousy job. And that's because people take too long to issue information. They haven't thought through the tools they're going to use to communicate, and they just don't have the appropriate templates and processes to be effective. So an exercise allows teams to practice clear, direct, and timely communication. That's huge. So when we look at our leadership skills, the things I want to work on when I'm working with an incident commander or a leader of a team are the ones on my slide currently. I want them to plan and prioritize and reevaluate again, and then reprioritize and replan, because that's the way it is. And I want them to learn that taking risks and innovating on the fly is their job, which is very different than maybe how we run our day-to-day life. The job of the leader is to set the vision. We need to know where we're going. We are looking to the leader to give us the vision and the strategy to make it work. They also need to be able to manage complex work groups and issues and teams and work streams, because many times there are a zillion things happening at once. They need that practice. It gives them a good chance to enhance their skills and their knowledge, and then to understand and navigate this new organization, which is the organization of crisis. It's not usually your day job. The reporting lines are different. The people you're working with are different. And you need to know, how do you navigate all of that? Nothing better than an exercise for that practice. So when you look at your role in an exercise, I believe strongly it really is all about influencing human behavior, developing critical thinking, and shaping leadership skills. Because if you do that, you will do the three most important things. You're going to improve their performance, you're going to mature that team and their plans, and ultimately what happens then is you empower the organization. And that is an incredible opportunity. So when people say to me they went to an exercise and they didn't think it was very good or they didn't learn anything out of it, what I always say to myself under my breath is, oh my gosh, I feel so bad. That person missed a golden opportunity. Thankfully, in my 34 years of practice, I've never had anybody say that to me, but I've heard it, and that should not be the case. People should be excited about the exercises that you're designing. And that gets us to the power of the story. And this is really why an exercise is so darn compelling. When you tell stories, it's the best way to teach, persuade, and get people to understand. Because when you tell a story, you transfer experiences directly into someone's brain. We know that from watching an empowering movie or reading a book that really inspires you. They feel what you feel. They understand. They empathize. It's been proven over and over in research that when you communicate the most effectively, you can get a group of people's brains literally to synchronize and move forward. Wow, isn't that what you want when you have a crisis? As you relate to somebody's desires and needs through the story that you're telling, they become those desires of the audience. And when a trouble develops or an issue happens in your exercise, they gasp in unison because we're all there together. And when it's a great ending, we all smile together. We all inherently know this when we hear a good story. You develop empathy with the teller because you experience the events personally yourself. Stories have that power. And they have been the primary source of information since the beginning of time, before the written word, before the internet, and even before Google. So, considering all of that, what I want you to think about is the power of storytelling, because that's what an exercise is. Stories spark emotions, and if you do any research on adult learning, you'll know that when people have an emotional connection, they learn. That's because we're intuitive and we're emotional, and we are, as well as being deliberate and rational beings. So you people may not understand what you're asking them to do if they're not emotionally engaged, and they just won't do it. So you have to engage them because we want them to do things to actually move forward in our crisis. People also use stories to make sense of things. That's how we kind of work through problems. So leaders will share some sort of strategic narrative that engages people in a wider context of the path or the journey or the exercise by giving them a framework to understand. And the story is the core message because they can interpret it many different ways. But stop and think that a good exercise will spark emotions and that will enhance learning. They will use that experience to actually make sense of things. And then lastly, they're going to learn. Stories are one of the best ways of learning from others. Storytelling is actually a great way for a leader to change behavior, and it's also a great way for an organization to become more agile. Because in that story, they're developing something that we call muscle memory. They're going to learn this. How many times have you ever been in a crisis or a plan activation, a real one, and the first thing that people did was pull out their plans? Now, come on. Really? No one. Of course. We don't do that. What we do is we go back to our last experience. And what I always tell people in my classes when I teach exercise design is I don't want them to have to fall back so far that they hit the floor. I want them to fall back to that last great exercise you gave them because that's going to give them the muscle memory to go forward until they think, oh yeah, I should pull out my plan. So exercises are stories. Stories are exercises. Exercises are nothing more than dropping your team into the story. I always say when I design an exercise with somebody, this is like dropping him into a movie or a book or a play. It's the beginning chapter, if you will. So the story puts the team in context about the theory of their roles and responsibilities. It's so more profound than just giving somebody a plan saying, read it and let me know if you have any questions. We want muscle memory to be developed, and the way you do that is through an exercise. Now, first of all, let me just talk a little bit about how we design exercises and how do we go about telling these stories. And it's something that I designed many years ago called the silly little question. So when we first sit down to design an exercise with somebody, so if somebody hires us to do an exercise, the first thing I want to do is I want to sit down with them and I want to talk about what I call the silly little question. And the reason I call it the silly little question is because, frankly, it sounds so simple and so basic, you can't believe it's going to provide you any value. But the answer to the silly little question holds incredible value. And it will, whether you realize it or not, tell you everything you need to know about how to design this exercise. Now, when people hire us, the first thing they always want to talk about is a narrative. I want to do a cyber exercise. Ooh, I want to do a tornado. Ooh, I want to do an earthquake. I don't care about the narrative. I want to talk about the silly little question. And that incredibly silly little question, which holds the key to everything, is why are we doing this? Why are we doing this exercise? That answer to that simple little question is the keys to the kingdom. It tells you everything you need to know. Now, other ways of asking that, and I'll tell you, I ask it in about as many ways you could possibly do, is what do you want to get out of this? At the end of the day, what do you want to have accomplished? What do you want to learn? Now, why that's so darn important is that many times people have this idea that a certain narrative will tell them everything they want to know. And what they realize if they are simply narrative driven, that they're actually missing the whole point. And that's what we really need to really peel back. So what you need to think about when you are designing an exercise is you want to talk to a variety of people. Maybe it's your incident commander. Maybe it's your key executive sponsor. Maybe it's folks in the C-suite. Maybe it's your key business continuity leaders. I want to ask them over and over again, why are we doing this? So this power of listening is so critical. You sit back, you ask the question, and then you sit back and listen. And they're going to tell you in your own words, in their words. And then you want to ask clarifying questions over and over again. Don't start talking about a narrative. So if somebody says to me, oh, I want to do a cyber breach, I would say to them, well, gee, what do you want to get out of that kind of an exercise? Why is that something that you think is going to be important for you? I will ask it a zillion different ways. So once you ask the question, your hardest job then, frankly, is just to be quiet. Listen, because they will tell you everything if you keep asking the right questions. So why is that going to help you? It's going to tell you, first of all, what kind of exercise is likely to develop the best results. So if somebody says to me, okay, the reason we want to do this exercise, why I really want out of this is because we just got a new plan and I really want to orient everybody to the plan. Great. Then I would say to you, the kind of exercise, the type of exercise that probably makes the best sense is an orientation exercise. It's a very straightforward, basic exercise, and there's no injects, and we're basically giving them a really simple narrative, and they're walking through their plans with maybe a series of questions. Really simple. But if they said to me, oh my gosh, we have a very sophisticated team and they really need to get much more deeply into the topic, I'd say, okay, great, we'd have a few more conversations, and then I'd be thinking about, wow, we need a functional exercise, or maybe even a full scale. The exercise question, why are we doing this, will tell me exactly what the goal is. It will tell me what the scope should be, but the scope is defined as who's playing and who's simulated. It'll tell me what the objectives should be, and the objectives are critical because they drive the entire design, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Ultimately, then, it will give me an idea about what a great narrative would be. So, for example, if somebody says to me, the reason we're doing this is our communications team cannot get their arms around effective communication, and every time we have an incident, we're late, we don't get the right information out. Great, then I'm going to make sure that the narrative has a huge component of communications in it. And maybe it's best if it's a highly public event. So maybe a cyber breach would be significant from a communication perspective, or something like an active shooter where there's a huge communication requirement as part of that. That will tell me the kind of narrative that's going to deliver that. And then lastly, it keeps me on track and it keeps my design team on track. We design all of our exercises by utilizing a design team, which are comprised of professionals out of the company who's hired us to do the exercise. And in that process, sometimes people will come up with the best ideas in the universe in that design team. But it doesn't even get into the question of why are we doing this. So it helps me not get wrapped up in that great idea and go back to why are we doing this? Okay, great. Having an earthquake in the middle of our tornado is not going to be a good idea, right? So the idea is it keeps us on track if you understand why you're doing it. So your task, once you've asked that question, frankly, is to peel back all the layers, because the way you ask that question over and over again, and many different versions of it, is it will give you every answer that you need in order to do the exercise. So that's our primary goal when we start on any exercise design. When we look at how we're going to make this the perfect exercise, is why are we doing this? And I need to deeply understand that. It will also help me prevent Martians landing in the middle of my exercise. And by that I mean sometimes, again, people have come up with these really crazy great ideas. Oh my gosh, well, that could be a Martian in my exercise because it does not meet why are we doing this. So it's the answer to all. Then there's some key concepts, and so in the area of exercise design, there are many, many things I could share with you, but I only have a short period of time today. In fact, you could write a whole book about it. And in fact, I've written 3 books on exercise design, and I've authored several college-level classes because there's a lot to talk about to do a great exercise. But in our webinar today, we don't have the time to peel all of it back. So I'm only going to talk about 3 things when I talk about designing the perfect exercise. So the first thing is I want to talk about deciding on what you're exercising. I want to talk briefly about terminology, and then I also want to talk about what we call the exercise plan. So the first thing is, what are you exercising? Now, this may sound like a completely silly question, but let's talk about it for a moment. Are you exercising an emergency response exercise? Are you exercising business continuity or disaster recovery or something else? So let's peel this back for a moment. Let's say that you're focused on the narrative of a tornado. So you've actually explored the tornado, and that you think that's going to really answer the question, why are we doing this, when you actually get down to the end of what it's going to give you. But then you make a very pivotal error in your exercise. And that is, let's say that you've decided that your most important thing you want to work on is business continuity, and you want to talk about developing and really exercising these business continuity plans, and you feel the best way to do that, given your risk profile, is to have a tornado exercise. Great, great, great idea. Okay, so when you design the exercise and you actually launch the narrative on the day of the exercise, you make a big mistake. You start the exercise clock, which means when we actually begin the exercise activity, and it starts moments after the tornado has actually hit your building. Stop and think about this. What kind of exercise have you just designed? Well, it's pretty darn easy. You're designing now, or your team is going to experience, I should say, an emergency response exercise. If the tornadoes just hit your building, let's get real here for a moment. You don't want people pulling out their business continuity plans. You want people focused on what's important, life safety. Life safety is absolutely critically important, and that's what I want people to be focusing on right now. So understanding that is critical, because if you don't know why you're doing this and you don't understand it, you'll actually then possibly do something like that, starting the clock at the wrong time. So when you understand that silly little question, it helps you decide that. So if I'm doing in a business continuity exercise and I'm doing a tornado narrative, great narrative, then what I would do is I would start the clock probably 4 or 5 hours after the tornado had hit the building. And what I would then do is I would actually then tell the story of what happened from the time the tornado hit to 4 hours in. So I would talk about what happened, the emergency responders arrived, the numbers of injuries or fatalities, the kind of damage to the facility as best we would know in that period of time, whether we had utilities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the conditions of the roads around. And so that way, when you launch the story, people could see what had happened. They could see what was going on. They could see the damage, which of course would take a while to understand. And then what you would do is that then you would actually start, and they could focus on business continuity. But if you do it at the moment of the tornado, that's not going to happen. The second piece is about exercise or test. So this is about terminology. I have a huge bias about this. I believe that words really have power. And if you invite people to participate in a test, what's the first thing that they're going to be thinking about? Yeah, they're thinking about, oh my gosh, this person's going to grade me. I'm going to be evaluated on my performance. That's not at all what I'm interested in doing. In an exercise, I am interested in improving human behavior. I'm improving human skills. I'm improving plans. I expect, I pray, I hope for a zillion mistakes. I want a zillion mistakes because I would rather have them make a big mistake with me than to make that big mistake in the real event. So I say right up at the very beginning in our exercise plan document, I have a long section on instructions to participants. And the first thing I always say is that exercises have the greatest value if they're treated as being real. There is no grade. There is no pass-fail. We expect and applaud mistakes because I want them to feel good about trying. I want them to improve. So think about what you call your exercise. People in technology very commonly call them tests. And I just ask people to think about, are you holding an exercise or a test? Are you really evaluating or passing and failing people? Give them some other consideration or some other option. The third thing I want to talk about is the exercise plan. Now, as you see on the slide in front of you, there are a variety of things that are in a basic exercise plan. I peel this back at length in my books, and I'm only going to talk about 3 of the actual objectives or the 3 of the actual components today. But I think even if I'm doing a simple orientation exercise, a basic tabletop, an advanced tabletop, a functional or full scale, I always do an exercise plan. And the reason for that is it gives people the rules of the road. So let me just quickly talk through each one of these sections, and I'm going to focus then on the topics in red. The exercise type is what kind are you doing? So is it an orientation or a drill even, or a advanced tabletop, basic tabletop, etc. So people know what to expect. I'll talk about scope and goal in a moment. The agenda. I always give them the full agenda. You know, what time is breakfast and coffee, and then what do we do after that, and how long is the exercise, and what's the debriefing schedule, and what's the next steps, and the whole time frame, and then who the speakers are. I always talk about communications in the exercise, and what does that mean? Communications are things such as, do you want or expect them, or would you like them to reach out of the exercise and call a real department? Now, I often encourage people to do that in an exercise, because if they don't have a real piece of information that actually they need in order to process and move forward in the exercise, they first of all learned that they don't have that in their plans. That's learning. But if you don't let them call anybody, then the learning is pretty narrow, isn't it? They're not going to get much farther than that. That's a waste. So I tell them, gosh, if you're stuck, if you need a piece of data, okay, you learned that, great, check, and then call somebody that has it, and then add that to your plan. If we're using a simulation team, which we use in advanced tabletops, functionals, and full scales, I always talk about how the simulation team works and how they use them. We always talk about evaluation. How is the exercise evaluated? And we normally do that in 3 different ways. We always have a written evaluation, always, 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 because people sometimes will tell me something in writing that they would never say out loud in the room. So it's always good to get people to reflect on it in writing. The second way we evaluate an exercise is through a debriefing session, which we hold at the end of every exercise. In the public sector, they call it a hot wash. And that's essentially what worked and what needs improvement. The third thing we use for evaluation is actually then the observers. So I always have observers in exercises who are positioned in every team or location area, and they can then capture the key things that the team did well and the things that they need improvement. I always have a list of participant instructions. I gave you an example of that just a moment ago when I talked about the comment that I have exercises need to be treated as being real. People need to stay in role, that we don't grade or give grades at the end of the performance, and there's no pass-fail. And I have a list of about probably 7 to 10 things I most commonly say to people. Under artificialities, there's a lot of things in an exercise that we designed that are blatantly changed because we need it to meet the question, why are we doing this? So we might change the date. We might change the time. We might change the temperature of the day. We might change the weather in broad strokes. We might put people on vacation. We might do all kinds of things in order to meet the objectives. And that's what the artificialities are. All those things that are blatantly not true. The next one is assumptions. Sometimes there are assumptions that people will automatically make. I would rather make it for them. So after an earthquake, for example, I might say that under assumptions that telephone service is out for what's forecasted to be 24 hours, utilities are out for what's forecasted to be 48 hours. I may make assumptions that about whether a network is up or down, whatever it is, because they're going to make them anyway, and you want them to have the same things that you have in mind. And then lastly, there's the opening narrative. So in an exercise plan, it's probably somewhere between 2 and 4 pages. It has all of this material. And at the beginning of every exercise, the first thing I do is I always review the entire exercise plan. So we're all on the same page, marching down the same road. So let's peel back the items in red. The first one is a scope. This is really important, and I'm often amazed that people don't think much about this. You actually really need to know right up front who is playing and who's simulated. Because when you're writing injects, and so injects are those things that you insert into the exercise after you've given them the baseline narrative. And you'll do that in any exercise, such as a basic tabletop, an advanced tabletop, a full scale, or a functional. You're going to give them additional things to do. Now, if they don't know who's in scope, they're not going to know exactly how to frame those injects, or they're not going to know who they can reach out to. So the scope is really important. So that goes back to the question, why are we doing this? That will tell you who's in scope. Is it just a crisis management team, or is it the crisis management team and the 7 critical business units? Or is it the crisis management team at the headquarters and the incident management team that's actually at the regional office, if you're doing a multi-site exercise? So who's playing? Who is actually playing in the exercise? And then what we'll also say is who's simulated. So if you look at a scope of one of our exercise plans, you might see something like the crisis management team at the headquarters is activated. All other players, all other teams are simulated, which means I have a simulation team actually acting like them. So the scope, small little thing, but if you don't have that clearly laid out, it's a problem when you actually start the exercise. So that silly little question, when you look at scope, will tell you what teams are playing, It will tell you whether you've got business units that you need to have engaged. It will also tell you whether there's specific people that might need to be stated based on the narrative. And it also might include geographical areas. We often will do what are called multi-site exercises, which might be different countries participating or different cities or states, and it just gives people an idea of who's in the game, and that's really what you want to be thinking about. All right, so then let's talk about the next thing, which is the goal. This is so important. The goal is really important because what this does is it is the ultimate answer to the question of why are we doing this. It should be a very brief, clearly stated reason about why the heck you're doing this exercise. What do you want to get out of it? Because for me, the goal, along with those exercise objectives, drives the entire design. Because if I am marching towards why am I doing this, and I look down at that goal and I see the exact reason we're doing this. So maybe it might be to assess whether the team is able to manage a cyber-related event and its post-communication issues. Then I would have a series of objectives that would drive towards that. That tells me exactly what my narrative has to be. It tells me exactly what the injects have to be because I know what the goal is. I'm really, really clear. So that's all about the vision. And what I want you to think about is if you're designing an exercise, you are the vision holder. You're the only one that has the vision of where this thing is going. So you need to make sure that you're really, really clear. And the goal should be a banner above your computer that says exactly what you're trying to design. And that will really help you not ending up into, the swamp. So the goal, the way I go about doing that when I'm asking this silly little question of why are we doing this, is I do a bunch of interviews. And they can be short. They can be 15 minutes. They could be even less, perhaps. But I want to talk to the right people. So it's going to be my incident commander. We use ICS in almost all the companies that we work with, and so we call the person in charge the incident commander. But it could be other names, whoever's in charge there. I'll talk to key executives, the executive sponsor. If there's some managers, I want to talk to them. There could be some other key individuals. So if I'm doing a cyber breach exercise, I'm going to talk to the InfoSec person. I might talk to the CISO. I might talk to people that are in different aspects of the technology environment because, again, I'm trying to peel it all back to see what the goal is ultimately. So when I'm really clear about the goal, then I jump to the next thing, which is now looking at the objectives. And they really are, again, the real answer of why we're doing this. They help establish the direction of the exercise. So when I'm in the design part, I know exactly what I'm doing because I'm looking down those goals. They can also really help me with the direction and the flow of the exercise injects. So again, if one of my objectives is to assess communication abilities of the company to respond in a timely manner, you can bet that I'm going to have a zillion injects in this exercise that are driving towards communication. So I'll have social media injects like Twitter and Facebook. I'll have YouTube injects perhaps. I might have things from different media outlets calling because I'm driven towards that objective. It also keeps the scope on track and narrows it because sometimes you can just create all kinds of activities and it's just simply activities and it doesn't meet the objectives. You can do a lot in an exercise and this helps you stay focused. It keeps the exercise and the participants on track. It's really important for the design process and the design team. And then lastly, we use as objectives when we're trying to evaluate, geez, how did we do in this exercise? Did we actually meet what we were asked to do? So they're a great tool for evaluation and your observers. And when I write an after action report, you're going to see a reflection of the objectives in my assessment. So then what about the exercise objectives? We generally will have maybe 3 to 5 overall objectives that are broad, that are driving the design. There may be more. And in some organizations, if we do a really complicated exercise, we might even have let's say you have 5 to 10 overall objectives for the exercise, but then every department that's participating might actually have a series of objectives as well. It is not uncommon for us, if we do a full-scale exercise, to maybe have 10 overall exercise objectives. And recently we did an exercise that had about 20 departments playing, and every department was asked, what do you want to get out of this? Why are we doing this for you? And they wrote their own objectives, and then that helped frame the injects that were written for those particular teams so they could actually work on what they wanted to work on. So it's really critical for guiding the design and really assessing the outcome. So when you look at all those three things, let me just give you some examples that you can think about when you look at an exercise plan. And I'm just focusing on the three things I just spent a little bit of time talking about. The first is scope, so what you might see in an exercise plan that we would create, the scope would be crisis management team and IT InfoSec. All other parties are simulated so that they know that if it's the person they want to speak to or want to plug into is on the crisis management team or is IT information security, they're part of my group planning. But if they need to reach out to anybody else, they'd have to talk to a real person in a real department because they're out of my scope. The goal, to experience a cyber breach and determine an appropriate initial response. And that could be a very simple but very broad and good, solid goal. An objective for that particular goal might be to assess the communication and escalation strategies between the CMT, crisis management team, and IT during a breach incident. That's a great one to look at. And there would probably likely be many more for that particular kind of narrative. But that gives you an idea about what I'm talking about when you look at the actual plan. So before I move on and talk about after action reports, I really want to give a big call out to say that designing a basic exercise plan that includes all the comments that I had in the previous slide will keep you on track. It will tell your team exactly what you're doing and how they're going to be focused, and it will also make your exercise have less wrinkles as you actually engage the players. The last piece I want to talk about is the after action report, which I think is so important. And a couple things about the after action report is really, really critical. What you're looking for in your after action report is to think about the observations that you're sharing in that after action report. Your after action report can really influence behavior. It's going to also assist you in developing the critical thinking and the leadership development. So we make a commitment to our clients that we release after action reports no later than 10 days after we do an exercise. Never more than 10 days. And why do we do that? There is this little tiny window that opens up when you do an exercise. And when you do that exercise, people walk out of the room and they go, wow, that was great. I learned so much. I need to change my plans, blah, 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 blah. But then if you take a long time to actually publish that report and it comes out like a month later, they're going to think about, what exercise? Oh, yeah, whatever. I'm too busy now. You have a little tiny moment when the window is open. And you need to stuff as much as you possibly can in that window before it closes again, because it will. So when we write that after action report, I always have in the back of my mind why we did this. The question, why are we doing this? It tells me exactly what I need to put in that report. And what you want to think about that report is how can you then present that to the key stakeholders and senior management, audit, risk committees. That thing needs to move around. Hopefully you've got a business continuity steering committee that you can present that report to because they can help you in driving forward on all of the things you want to achieve that should have been under your topic of observations or recommendations. And use it as a tool to improve the team, the plan, and the program. Let me just make one comment on the terminology about exercise plan, exercise after action reports. The term recommendations we don't use at all anymore. I used to for many years, and probably 20 years ago I stopped using it. And that's because many of our clients are federally regulated, banking and financial institutions, and the term recommendation has a big R in front of it, and it really gets people's attention, especially regulators or even audit committees. So we now use the word observations. Frankly, they're the same thing, but we found it just made our clients' lives much easier, and you might want to consider the same thing yourself. So what I would like you to think about in this whole conversation that we've had today is that you personally have the power to influence your program, your plans, and your teams through creating a powerful experience. Exercises are your golden opportunity to do just that, to create a compelling experience that's going to ensure ensure that you actually influence human behavior, develop critical thinking skills, and shape leadership and abilities in your team. And you actually have the power to make that happen. So what I ask you to do is to think about capturing this great opportunity, because exercises are golden, because they will do all of those things: influence behavior, develop critical thinking, shape leadership skills. So what's your biggest challenge going forward? Well, frankly, it's a little bit of herding. And so to do that, I want to show you my all-time favorite commercial ever that you might get a chuckle out of this morning.
Anybody can herd cattle, holding cows and walking shorts, everything all together. Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning right here, and if you look at his face, it is ripped to shreds, you know.
You see the movies, you hear the stories. I'm living a dream. Not everyone can do what we do.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and you ain't fucked to one of them, ain't a feeling like in the world.
So my question for all of you is, what kind of herder do you want to be? And my hope is that you're the guy there, because I want them to say about you, the kid is good. And on that note, I'm going to hand it to Andrew.
Hello, thank you very much. And thank you, Regina. As always, a really engaging topic, and one that I found personally very, very interesting. And it certainly mimics a lot of my experiences out in the real world. So ultimately, why do we do this exercising? And that's because in the event that something occurs, we are going to be asked that question. Can we account for our employees? Can we ensure that our business can bring its systems back online? Can we ensure the continuity of our services? And today what I'm going to do is look very simply at a scenario where exercising was actually able to turn around a significant issue. And that issue was unfortunately caused by one of the recent terrorist attacks in. Now, what I'm showing you here right now is a real practical example of two clients that I worked with. Both clients had a notification system, had a crisis management plan, and had an incident plan. Both of the plans were almost identical, which was to, in the event that there is an incident that could or does affect their employees, they want to ensure that they can go out and contact everybody within 1 hour. Now, you can see there's a pretty big difference here, and I'm sure none of you would want to be that client on the left. Well, that's who we're going to talk about. So effectively, this organization decided that exercising was something that they didn't want to invest in too heavily. So when they came to actually activating their plan, they got a result that was very, very undesirable. Now, I was actually brought in to then help prepare for the next time this happens. So what did we do? Well, the first question we asked was that little question, as Regina said, what do you want to achieve? And it was, we want to be able to communicate and confirm that all of our people are responding within 1 hour. If they do not respond, we then want to escalate and say, we cannot contact this person, we need to start speaking to the authorities and or first responders. So we had a number of questions to answer. first of all, before we could even get round to thinking about what we wanted to do. And that first set of questions was to speak to the leadership team and understand, well, okay, what is your acceptable response rate? And the reply that I got was as high as possible, as soon as possible. Well, okay, great. That's wonderful. So we've now had our goal set. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to use we need to use as many contact paths as we possibly can. We need to ensure that regardless of what's happening with technology in the world, we can try all reasonable methods of speaking to people. And the last but not least thing that we needed to do was look at the data that we had at our disposal and figure out, did we have adequate resources in that space? Is the answer yes? Is the answer no? Do we not know? And we need to come up and prepare a plan to put into place so we can then start exercising. The next thing that we needed to do was we needed to educate those users, because a lot of people were getting a notification and they were then looking at their phone and thinking, I don't know what this is. Is this a phishing email? I'm not going to respond to this. I'm not going to click on the link. I've not been told about this. It's not important. And 100 other different examples. So we really needed to educate the people and say, hey, if you get these messages, these are important, you need to respond. And the only way to do that is repetition. It's to build that muscle memory. The second piece, which was really around education, and this is where doing drills is so important, and training the people who are going to initiate those touch points is so important, is to give them the skills and the confidence, because people are human, to give them the confidence to push that button. And by doing that, you can put templates in place, and that really helps people so they don't, at 3 o'clock in the morning or whenever something's happening when they're under a lot of stress, they don't have to think about typing in lots of detail or selecting the right sets of people. They can have something that's immediately available to them. The next thing we needed to think about was, well, we need to be able to report on those results, and we need to know what that escalation strategy is and how do we follow up. And again, this is something that you can only ever understand through doing, and it's very, very important that this step is included. So what did we do next? We then tested, and I say test, and I deliberately use the word test here because we would actually set ourselves a target, let's say 97%. We will then use the notification system out to our employee base. Do we hit that number within the certain hour? We set targets internally, and we use that as a benchmark, and that benchmark is communicated internally across the organization. Did we get that? Did we not get that? So how frequently did we do those exercises and those tests? Well, to start with, it was once a month. Once we got good at it, we moved out to once a quarter. Keeping that frequency was very, very important, because that really does allow us to be in a position where we've set up an effective exercising program that enables us to be very clear and very concise when something happens. And it really, people getting those messages, receiving those notifications, reminds them, hey, business continuity is important. Business continuity is something we need to think about. We need to have that in our minds when we're doing our day-to-day jobs. And that's really part of the golden opportunity here, of keeping that presence of mind and really being able to make this something that is part of a day-to-day activity, as opposed to something that only happens when something really does go wrong. So that's it from me today, and I hope I've given you some really good nuggets, and once again, thank you.
All right, thank you, Andrew. At this point, we will move on to our Q&A portion of the presentation. As a reminder to attendees, you can submit your questions by typing into the open text field on your screen and submitting it to all panelists. The first question we have is for you, Regina. Do you recommend doing training exercises in real-life scenarios?
So let me think about how to answer that for a moment. So I always want people to be doing real life scenarios, but the question might be, and maybe they could maybe get a little clearer about this. Do we do exercises that are in real time, meaning do we do them as a surprise or something like that? Generally, the answer is no, I don't do a surprise kind of exercise. But you really want to do real life stories. So I would ask you, when you're thinking about the narrative you're going to select, look at your risk profile for your business. So everybody has, for example, an active shooter possibility in the United States for sure. Then what are your other options? Floods, tornadoes, earthquakes. What could happen to you? Pick something that's real and realistic. Another real one would be a cyber breach. So yes, I would totally pick realistic scenarios, always.
All right, thank you. Next question is for you, Andrew. Do you recommend creating message templates for different types of scenarios during training exercises?
Yes, they can be very helpful. It can not only assist in moving the exercise along, but it also, again, enables the people to use a simulated exercise template for effectively what they would see in a real life scenario, because really that's what you want to do, is you want to try and make this as realistic as you possibly can.
Next question we have is for you, Regina. Do you have a recommendation for how frequently we should run our training exercises?
That's a great question. My experience with exercises is that you need to do them the first year you start an exercise program. I would always do them twice in that first year in particular. My preference in our client population is to do it twice a year. However, over time, the more proficient they become, you might be able to do it every year. However, let me say this. You could do one big exercise every year, let's say. Maybe it's a functional or an advanced tabletop exercise. But you could do also a very, very simple exercise periodically, maybe once a quarter. And these are things that we call ripped from the news. So if you take any newspaper anywhere in the world and you flip through those pages, you're going to find an exercise maybe on every single page. It could be a power outage, it could be a fiber optic cut, it could be a cyber breach, it could be a flood, it could be a zillion things. You take that very simple narrative and you assemble the team that you wish to exercise, and maybe it's over a lunch meeting or something like that. And you talk to her and say, okay, great, this is the kind of thing that just happened here today. I want you to pull out your plans and I want you to decide how we're going to respond. And so when we work with an incident management team, you could do this rip from the news exercise, and you could do three things. You could help refine their roles and responsibilities. You could redefine the assessment process, and you could, again, go back to how you develop an action plan. Those are the three most important skills anybody needs to know. And you could do that in a very simple format because we're trying to build muscle memory. So ideally twice a year, minimally once a year, and if you do once a year in particular, you should be doing a rip from the news probably every quarter.
All right, thank you. Next question is for you, Andrew. When testing out our notification system, we want to be sure that everyone in the building gets the messages. Do you have any recommendations for ensuring that we have accurate contact data in our system?
Yeah, that is an absolutely great question. It's probably one of the ones I get asked the most when working with clients. And this, in theory, it's very simple. And it's all to do with data management and having a reliable source of information. Now, when you start mixing in things like data privacy, certainly over here in Europe, and of course your employees' willingness to give up additional contact paths, that's where things can get a little bit more complicated. Now, I firmly believe, and I've certainly seen this demonstrated, that actually the best way to demonstrate your data is working is by exercising and actually asking people on a regular basis to ensure that their information is up to date. Now, in some cases, there could even be a regulatory requirement around that. And in other circumstances, I've actually seen performance management attached to ensuring that your contact information is up to date in the HR system, or at least the emergency contact system. So really there's a lot of things you can do, and I think that the most important part of that is actually running your exercises on a regular basis to ensure that you don't lull yourself into a false sense of security, and you really can demonstrate that everything is as it should be.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Just a few more questions here, and then we'll wrap up. This one's for you, Regina. Other than training, what do you recommend to reduce or eliminate executive interference during a critical event where someone attempts to change priorities, for example, that differ from your action plan that was in place?
That's a great question. So again, I'm a huge fan of having executives participate in exercises because that's the only way they're going to learn their role. Executives generally, who I've worked with over the years, don't want to look stupid. They don't want to be embarrassed. And if they don't know what their job is at the time of crisis, they're going to do what they think they should do, and that could be completely different than what you want them to do. So you've got to exercise with them. But having said that, you need to make sure you have a very short exercise, a short executive plan. It's probably no more than 4 pages probably of what their job is. And I'll tell you what their job is, even though I don't know you at all as far as what your business is. I know there are 4 things that executives need to do. They need to develop strategic policy in response to the crisis. They need to approve expenditures of funds that exceed the ability of the incident management team who's managing the incident. They need to be a senior relationship manager, which means they need to reach out to big customers, big government officials, whomever are the big senior people, because a senior person needs to talk to a senior person. And then last, really, really bad, they need to be the person very likely who's doing press interviews or on camera. So if they know their job, and it's written down, and they had some training, every time you do an exercise, they should be participating, calling into a phone bridge, receiving a report from the incident commander so they know what their job is. And then when the bad thing happens, they will do, as we all do, what we've learned. And that's the best way to resolve the issue of what executives do post-incident.
All right, thank you. One last question here, and then we will wrap up. Neil wants to know, Regina, if you advocate doing out-of-hours exercises to gain deeper insight into the level of response an organization is likely to get outside of normal business hours.
That's a great question. So in particular, many organizations may have a very limited staff that might be off hours or very limited reach. The way I would start an exercise program is I would always do it under, first of all, the most ideal conditions, daytime, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at your overall risk profile and you think, oh my gosh, if this happened after hours because of X, Y, and Z, we would really be in big trouble. I would be very inclined to maybe do a relatively short after hours exercise, maybe not the full-blown thing where people have to come in. Maybe it could be a virtual exercise, and you could see, well, who is available, and how would this really work, and how would we be communicating with the folks at the office? So you could probably, the first time I would probably do it, I would do a virtual one, but I would not do it until your team was really well skilled in their plans, their processes, and they've had good experience. Then take it to the next level, and that way doing an off-hours exercise and maybe first of all doing it virtually would be a great thing, because I bet you would learn a lot. Because if you think it's not going to work very well post-hours, you're probably right.
All right, thank you, Regina. One last announcement before we wrap up. To all of you who are asking if you'll be getting a copy of the recording and the slides, we will be sending out an email with both of those in the next day or two. So rest assured you will be getting copies of both the recording and the slides. And with that, I want to thank Regina and Andrew for a great session, and to all of you who were able to join us today. If you haven't already, please take a moment to follow us on Twitter @Everbridge and join our group on LinkedIn, Everbridge Incident Management and Emergency Notification Professionals. For those of you interested in requesting a demo of the Everbridge system, please visit everbridge.com/request-demo. Thank you all again for today, and we hope to see you online again soon. Have a great day.